Hi everyone, we are back with the 2020 BIZ Kickstart event. And on the 3rd of January, we have Anne-Louise joining me, discussing all things intuition and how I can benefit you and your business this year. Anne-Louise, thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No worries. So tell us a bit about yourself. How did you get into the whole intuition thing? How did you get started? Was it, was it a career move? Was it just an intuitive thing? Excuse the pun early on. Talk to us a bit about how you got started.
Well, it was kind of, when I first started coaching, intuition wasn't a thing that was something that, as you say, suddenly hit me. I listened to an interview with a lady who was a coach, and she was talking about the fact that she was happily married, had 2 children, but she wasn't happy and she didn't know why. Now I'm listening to this going, well, this sounds very familiar. I was working part-time, had my children, they were quite young at the time, and happily married, but there was something missing. There was this sense of, I know I can feel differently. I know that it was happiness a bit, but it was more about feeling alive. It was more about feeling vibrant and wanting more out of life. But I'd sort of tick the boxes that society had said, well, you should be happy when you get married, you should be happy when you've got a family, and ticked all those boxes. And I knew there was more. I was here to do more. So I did a mastermind with her, and then worked with her so that she mentored me so that I could become a coach. And then the intuitive part really came about when I started realizing that I could intuitively feel into where my clients were struggling with their limiting beliefs. So I help mostly women to move past their limiting beliefs so that they can stop sabotaging their own success. And I felt that I was talking to clients and they'd say to me, oh, my limiting belief is this, or my limiting belief is that. And I would have this intuitive feeling that wasn't the true reason. So I'd have this kind of strong feeling, and then I'd ask them questions, and we'd actually discover that there was more to that belief. Like it went back further, either childhood or something had happened to them, but they hadn't associated that limiting belief with that time in their life. But intuitively, I knew that that was the case. And then also I started intuitively channeling in, for those that I don't like using the word woo, but that seems to be the word that most people use. Yeah. I'm able to channel in messages from the universe. So when I speak to my clients, I can say the universe is saying to you, and I describe that as being intuitively channeling in those messages. And that really didn't come about until I'd been in the coaching business for a year or so. But actually, when I think about it, I have been intuitive since I was very young. I just didn't think, I didn't know it was my intuition then. So there was one point when I think I was in my early mid-20s, and I went on holiday with a friend, and my father wasn't very well. It took me to the airport and thought we had a bit of food poisoning. And about 12 hours later, I said to my friend, I've got to ring home. I intuitively have this feeling that something is wrong. And when I rang home, my mum said, yes, they had to call an ambulance, and he actually was very unwell. But I at the time, it was just, I just know. It wasn't something I'd put down to intuition. But I think we're all very intuitive as children. I think we are all intuitive. It's just learning to sort of move our brains aside, our conscious mind aside, and feel into that intuitive feeling.
Yeah, it does sort of make sense. That was one of the things I was thinking of. Well, we all have feelings, we all feel something. Yeah. I mean, my first instinct was, well, it's just grade 2 and lesser degrees, I suppose. While there's some people, is there a difference between having the feeling and being aware of it and then acting on it? Because there'd be loads of people that's, oh, well, I feel certain things all the time, but I just brush them off, or I don't listen to them, or I listen to them, but then I don't fully commit to it just in case it was just a feeling.
Yeah.
Is that something that is common? Is that a regular thing? Is that something that you agree with for the start? Because I know I'm sort of giving my own thoughts on it, but what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's true. You're absolutely right. I think everybody has those feelings and intuitive, but it comes down to, I believe it comes down to like trusting yourself and trusting those feelings, because but like you said, it's very easy to dismiss it and say, oh, I've got that feeling, but is it right? Is it an intuitive feeling? Is it just my mind? And it comes down to trusting your intuition more and more. So when I talk to people about helping them to strengthen their intuition, is to say to them, get quite playful with those feelings, because there'll be a time in your life, I'm sure, when you have said you made a decision on something and you had an intuitive feeling that said, I should or shouldn't have done that, and you ignored it. And then you look back and you think, I knew, I had a feeling that I should have done that, or I had my intuition was telling me, and you ignored that feeling, and then you realise when you look back that you should have trusted that feeling. But what we tend to do is trust our intuition on those big life-changing decisions. We don't talk to our intuition at all. We don't listen to our intuition, and then suddenly this life-changing decision in business or in life comes up, and then we try and trust our intuition, and we're too scared to do it because it's such a huge decision. So what I would suggest and recommend is that you start trusting your intuition with really simple, playful decisions, like have fun with it, rather than going from never talking to your intuition to suddenly asking your intuition whether you should, I don't know, marry the love of your life, or big life decisions, or whether you should buy this house or move to another country, or these big decisions in life. And that's the only time you try and listen to your intuition. And then when your intuition tells you, you then, as you say, you start questioning it, and is this right? Is this my intuition? Is that a feeling I should follow? Whereas if you get a bit playful with it and have fun with it, with decisions that aren't life-changing, you will then start trusting that intuitive feeling more and more, trusting yourself more and more, but you don't feel the pressure of it being this huge life-changing decision.
It's interesting you say that, and sort of use the the muscle almost like an analogy, right? Like when you first do it, it's like it's not going to be as strong. Maybe you do push it off, maybe you don't listen, and the more you do it, the stronger it gets. Is that something that is that easy to do? Because I imagine with small decisions, like most people just go to like logic or common sense, or you just connect the dots and go, it's a small decision, this, and this, therefore this, without going, well, what if the feeling or the intuition is telling you something different? I imagine with big decisions, because there aren't a lot of dots to connect. Like it's very hard to be logical about moving abroad. It's hard to be logical about the big life decisions. So intuition is all you have to go on to a certain degree. You've got to go with what feels right because you've got no other alternative. But with something small, like what do I have for breakfast today? And you've got 3 choices in the fridge and 1 in the cupboard. It's like, well, there's only so many, you've got to go with what feels right for breakfast. It seems a bit weird.
It does.
So what sort of advice you have for people with the small decisions? Because in my own experience, there's tons of logic involved with the small decisions because it's a piece of cake, whether we act out of habit or not. But then with the big decisions, it's dead easy to go, it just felt right at the time because we don't have a lot to go on.
Yeah, I mean, using the breakfast example that you gave, you're absolutely right. Logic, because we're habitual, aren't we? We're habitual creatures, so you have the same thing every morning, or we get into the habit of logically thinking, well, what do I want to eat? And what I would start doing is just noticing of that feeling of like, what do I feel like having? I know it sounds crazy, and I know it sounds a bit ridiculous when you're making a decision over breakfast, but that's what you're trying to do, is feel into that intuitive feeling. What do I feel like? What is my gut telling me is right for me this morning? Is getting to that kind of playful, have fun with it, rather than it being a serious decision. Is the more playful and fun you become with your intuition. It's a bit like any friendship. If you're very serious in the friendship, or if you only call on that friend once every time you have a big decision, you need to kind of create that friendship. You need to build that relationship. You need to learn to trust. And if you can do that with, do I want a salad or a sandwich for lunch? Do I want breakfast? Do I want a tea or coffee? And I know they're very lighthearted, and it isn't easy to take that logical brain away. But if you think about it logically, but then if you try and feel in, is there a feeling here? And then maybe if that decision is so led by your mind, is then, okay, so take it up a notch, take it to a more difficult decision, not the life-changing ones, but take it to a bigger decision, perhaps something in your business. Perhaps you've got 2 ideas that you want to put out in the world in your business. It's like, okay, so intuitively, which one feels right to do first? So it's not a life-changing decision. You're probably going to bring them both out in the world eventually, but which one feels right for now? It's January, it's beginning of the year, and intuitively feel into which one feels right, so that you have a stronger relationship with your intuition. And another thing that's really important is to listen to it, listen to that feeling, because as you said, big decisions, logic doesn't often come in with those. And sometimes if you're trying to make a decision, a yes or no decision, you might, if you had a piece of paper and you drew a line down the middle of the paper and you wrote all the reasons why you should and all the reasons why you shouldn't, logically the decision might be that actually the decision is no, you shouldn't. Logically, you've got more reasons not to do something, but your gut, your intuition is absolutely calling you and saying, no, this is something you must do. And there are things that you don't know about, like your life yet, that will happen, but your intuition, your soul knows. So that feeling of, yes, I should do this, can overpower all those logical, sensible reasons that your mind is giving you not to, because intuitively it's the right thing. You just might not know the reason why yet.
Yeah, that sort of makes sense as well, because a lot of people, when it comes to, say, the opposite, so we say logic and reason and all those things, we can justify those. We have tons of reasons why, right? Like we've got this sort of whole story built up around why we should do something logically, but then with intuition or with the gut feeling, as you described it before, it's like, well, I don't really know why, but I'm just going to do it anyway. And sometimes it can fly in the face of everything that you've done to try and think about it logically. You know, you can write it all down, pros and cons. If this happens, what are the consequences? If this happens, what are the consequences? Can I get rid of some of those negative consequences if I do this, and you can do the full like spider web of like logic.
They're all ifs, aren't they? They're, like you said, if this happens, if you think about like in an organizational chart, you'd have that CEO at the top, and then it's not so much like this nowadays, but you used to have the CEO at the top, and then the management, and then it would go down. If you imagine you've got a yes or no decision at the top, and if you said yes, then these 6 scenarios could happen. And then if each one of those scenarios has another 6, I'm using 6 as an example, but have another 6 scenarios that can happen. And so it goes on and on and on. And then if it's no, there's another 6 scenarios that might happen if, maybe, if, perhaps could happen. And so you end up in that place, like you said, like what if, and there's thousands of what if that happens, that might happen, and that might, but that can send you into complete overwhelm in your head. Whereas if you have this if you can learn to feel into your intuition, that sense of making a decision is much easier, because you have this gut feel that says, right, this is a yes. And all those, because most of those what ifs won't happen anyway. And the minute you've made that decision, so say you said yes, all the what ifs that were under the no have gone. Yeah. Because you've said yes. And suddenly half your overwhelm disappears the minute you make a decision. And part of the reason as an entrepreneurs we end up in that procrastination, in that overwhelm, is because we are what if, and that might happen, and that might happen. when you follow your intuition, if you can get really strong with that intuitive gut feeling, you make that decision and then you take action and you're moving on. So while everybody else is sitting there going, yeah, but what if this, and yes and no and I don't know, you've made a decision, you've grabbed the opportunity and you're taking action on it while everybody else is sitting there going through the logic of it all.
Yeah, definitely, definitely sort of relate to speed being a thing. Like you sort of go, okay, well, if I think about it, as I often say, that the time that you spent overthinking about it, you could have taken action on something and realised whether it's worked or not, and adjusted and pivoted and changed and done everything else, you know. And same with this event, to be fair. When I first started it, it was, let's just see how I go. And then the more people I got on, it was, okay, I should probably take this more seriously now. I should probably get a landing page together, probably figure out some of the tech around it, should probably have, like, you know, figured out how to, where I'm going to put my lights and make sure the video is not completely hopeless, like I'm in some kind of cave somewhere. But in the first instance, it was, I want to go bigger than the 12-hour event that I did. How can I do that? I thought, well, I'm busier now. It's January. I don't have the time to sit on a computer for, I don't know, what's more than 12 hours, like 24 hours. I wasn't going to go ahead and do that. So it was like, well, I've got to be a bit more flexible with how I do it. But I thought, well, I'm going to do it. So let's see how many I can get involved, you know? And I think a big part of it as well is, have you ever had this where you've got the blueprint, you go all logic, and then plans change?
Yeah.
And then your head just goes, whoa, we've got to stick to the plan, and then the universe or the whatever it is, or the way circumstances work, it's like, well, you can't now because this has happened. So does intuition lend itself over to things like being flexible, and when things change, you're able to adjust? Like, what's that process like?
Well, it totally helps, because if you think your intuition is working all the time, so you can feel into what your gut is saying around something in any moment, it's there available to you, and I think it's one of the biggest strengths that we have, especially in business. So things change, things evolve. We should, as entrepreneurs, be evolving our businesses all the time. So there is a sense, as you say, you could have a plan. You have an idea like you had for this summit, you have this thought, this is how it's going to be, but life happens and things change. So it's like, okay, this is the scenario that's now presented itself. So going back to our yes, no, back to our situation where we're trying to decide what to do, you can just sit quietly, take a moment, and what is my intuition telling me? Because you can, it's not that when we've made our decision with our intuition, that's not then set in stone. That's your decision, your intuitive feeling for now, for today, for this moment. And then as circumstances change, as more you meet, you don't know who you're going to meet tomorrow, you don't know which conversations you're going to have, you don't know what you're going to read. I mean, social media as it is, we're bombarded, aren't we, daily with different things. And it might make you think differently, and you're like, okay, I now have a different scenario, I now want to take this part of my business in a different direction. What's my gut saying? What's my intuition saying? And I think actually the more connected you are to your intuition, the easier it is in your business to evolve quicker, because you're not spending that time going over the yes, the no's, the maybes, the what ifs, the fors, the against, because you're intuitively going, right, this is really what I need to be doing. And it's like that. One of the other thing I also say to people is you've got to learn to let go and allow. So when that intuitive feeling comes in, it's very easy for our heads to go, yeah, but what if? And yeah, but that might happen, and this might happen. And yes, it could, and it might do. But when it does or not, you can follow your intuition again and say, okay, I'm now going to feel in again to the different circumstances and scenarios. It's not that you make the decision on a Monday and that's your only decision and that's your intuitive decision for the next 7 days. You can change that minute by minute, hour by hour. Your intuition can guide you all the time, but sometimes we need to let go. We need to step back. We need to allow our minds to stop trying to be logical about it and allow that intuitive feeling. I mean, how many amazingly successful entrepreneurs say I followed that gut feeling, or I followed that whim, or they call it a whim. I followed that emotion because it felt so right, even though it might send them on a path, on a journey of risk or uncertainty, as often it does. But when they're on that stage talking about their amazing entrepreneurial life, they often refer back to that decision they made, that intuitive hit, that sudden, I just felt I had to do it and it was right. Yes, it was risky. Yes, it was scary. Yes, it was uncertain, but I followed it and look where I am now. And I think that's why we say try and bring it down to a smaller level, because often when we listen to people talking about using their intuition and making amazing decisions, it's the big ones, isn't it? It's when they're on stage and they're sharing their life story and they're saying they made this amazing decision. But actually, most of us are using our intuition regularly. We're probably using it without even realizing it. We don't even sometimes think about, we're going, yeah, oh, that feels right. Yeah. Oh, that feels right. Or that feels right. And you don't think about it being your intuition.
No, and the thing that you mentioned before about allowing it and trusting it and all those things is allowing part of that process as well, because most of us, I imagine, hold ourselves back because we don't trust ourselves. But then how do we encourage that trust? Because allowing, I imagine, is part of that sort of jigsaw as well, where it's like, well, if you can't allow it, then you are holding yourself back. Yeah. But then where does permission fit in? Where does the whole, I need permission to do this, whether it's from yourself or from others or gatekeepers or whatever the case is, how do we build that story around trusting ourselves? How do we develop that?
I think the first thing to do is to make the decision, is to make the choice that you are going to start trusting yourself. Or if you struggle with that, because often I find when I work with my clients is that their relationship with themselves isn't in a great place, and they don't trust themselves, and they don't have a good relationship with themselves. And when I turn around and say, right, you're going to learn to trust yourself, they kind of look at me as if it feels so alien. Yeah. So I think the first thing is to choose that you are opening up to the possibility that you can trust yourself. Right. So either you make the choice and decision that you're going to trust yourself, and if that feels too strange because you're just not there yet, then open up to the possibility that you're going to trust yourself. It's just taking it in small steps, opening yourself up to that possibility, and then until you get to that place where you go, okay, I'm going to trust myself. Because we've all had experiences where we've made decisions that we feel were the wrong decisions. We've all had experiences over our life where we, if I knew what I knew then, what I know now, I would have made a different decision. But you didn't. You made what you thought was the right decision then with what you knew then. Yeah. And yes, you might make a different decision if you knew what you knew now, but you didn't. And I think, big part of this is letting go of that, is forgiving yourself. Part of trusting yourself now is forgiving yourself for decisions that you made years ago, because you didn't know what you know today, and nothing can change that. So I think part of it is forgiveness, and part of it is making the choice and decision that you're going to trust yourself, and that you start like you said about the weights in the gym. You don't go to the gym and start lifting the heaviest weight. You build up with small weights first until your muscle gets stronger and stronger. And you don't give yourself a hard time if you go to the gym and you can't lift that heavy weight on day one. You understand that the muscle is building, and that every time you move up to the next weight, it feels good, and you pray, you celebrate and you praise yourself. It's the same kind of thing. If you continue to be hard on yourself because you're not making those big decisions, you're not following your intuition really easily, it's not happening for you immediately, then that's not going to help you trust yourself. That's not going to help you have a good relationship with yourself. Whereas if you understand that you're learning, you understand that you're building the muscle, you understand that you're making those decisions, just those small decisions first, and then you trust your intuition, and then it feels good. And you can trust your intuition on the smallest things. So something at home you might get this sudden thought that you need to take something with you when you leave the house, or you might have a sudden thought that you need to put something somewhere. It's not so much about the thing that you're doing, but the more you do that, the more you follow those intuitive thoughts, the more you're going to learn to trust yourself. You might have that thought to take something with you, and then you bump into someone that you didn't know you were going to meet, and you have something for them. I mean, they're just examples, but it's those little things, those little, oh, I feel I need to do that, or you run back in and you realize you've left your keys behind, or, you know, it's those intuitive feelings. And the more you trust yourself with things like that, the more you're going to build that relationship with yourself, and the more you're going to go, actually, do you know what? I trusted myself with that decision and it was the right one. And I trusted myself with that decision and that was a pretty good one. And the more, again, like building the muscle, you will then have that sense of, okay, I can do this. I can start trusting myself. But it starts with a decision. It starts with a choice. It starts with saying, I'm going to open up to the possibility that I can trust myself, or I am going to trust myself. Maybe, you know, beginning of the year, it's a great time to start and say, this year, I'm going to trust my decisions, and not to give yourself a hard time if it feels like in the moment that the decision feels crazy, like we were saying about the logic, like the fors and against. You know, the decision might feel absolutely crazy in that moment, but you don't know what life has in store for you over the next days, weeks, months, years.
No, that's it. And I think that sometimes you can get yourself in a position whereby you're so used to like thinking about things too much, almost. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it can become normal, right? Like you've got the whole sort of, well, I'm used to doing it this way, so I'm always going to do it this way.
Yeah.
And then from what you described there, like intuition can be the same thing. Like you can train it, you can build it, you can start small and build up to the bigger decisions, and pretty soon they'll become easy as well, and you'll start like wondering how on earth I've got to this point because I just follow my gut the entire time, and all those things. And I've had moments when I've forgot things, gone back home, and then the phone's rung. I was like, oh my God, if I wasn't home, I wouldn't have. Have you ever had moments like that as well, whereby things seem to have just happened? Like I had a spare hour that I didn't know that I'd had a couple of days ago, and I was like, I feel like doing this in this hour. And it's something I wouldn't have done otherwise because stress levels or whatever it was. It's like I had the hour where I just sat there going, I know. So does that ever happen to you or your clients? And have you got any examples maybe of, because a lot of people could be listening to this and going, well, I can do all that, and it doesn't mean anything's really going to be any different than if I was thinking logically. Like, where does the whole, like, amazing action come from, intuition, when most of the time it's logical anyway? And what, you know, how is it any different? How is it any better? Rather than sort of explaining it to us, do you have any examples of things like that?
I think, when you said about thinking, I think a lot of the things that I notice with my clients is they get to think, that they stop overthinking, they get to think less, because there is this sense of, yes, you can think about it logically. I would argue that while you're thinking logically, your intuition is working as well. Like, I'm not saying people should stop thinking logically. I'm not saying that people should switch their brains off and not think like that, because we're human beings. That's the way we are. And we will always have a logical sense. I just think that it makes life a lot easier when it comes to having that gut feel running alongside the way you're thinking. And a lot of my clients are like, it just becomes easier. Business becomes easier. Making decisions become easier. Things like if you were thinking about going to an event or doing something like this, for example, you know, you could procrastinate about that decision, or you might find that you miss out on an event. I've done that before, where I've ignored my intuition and I didn't go to an event, and I've discovered that clients are there, potential clients were there, and I really should have gone. and listen to my intuition. And you don't miss out on things. You don't have this sense of, the amount of energy we put into thinking, the amount of energy we put into logic, the amount of energy we put into should I, shouldn't I, and the what ifs and the maybes takes so much time and so much of your energy. Whereas if you're really tuned into your intuition, you're going to make that decision. You're going to go, right, there's an event. Do I want to go intuitively? Yes, I do. You book your ticket and you're done and you're there.
Mm-hmm.
And it saves so much time and energy. And I've also, when you were talking about things happening, I call it synchronicities. You know, I've made a decision to, so recently, I think it was November time, a friend of mine, client of mine said, I'm going to be in London. She lives in Scotland. I'm going to be in London at an event. Do you want to come with me? Now, there was no reason for me to go to the event itself. There was no, I hadn't been following the lady who was hosting the event, but something told me to be there. Something told me to go to the event, which I did. I then bumped into a lady after the event when we were chatting. She then came to my event the following week. She then came on my retreat, and she's now become a client. And I believe that my intuition was telling me to go to that event because I was meant to meet this particular lady and we were meant to connect. So I could easily have logically, and when it came to practicalities of going, childcare and all those kind of things, if I put it a logical approach to that, I wouldn't have gone. Because logically I had to sort out childcare and them coming home from school and all the things when you're a mum that you have to do. Now, and I wouldn't have gone. Logically, my brain would have said, no, logically don't go. But this lady's amazing. I've done some incredible work with her because I'd followed my intuition. And the decision was really easy because it was like, my intuition is telling me to be there, so I'm going to go. And you lose that sense of having to think and work it out and try, because you can't work out the what ifs.
No.
You've no idea what's going to happen. And I think that sense of just being able to go, okay, my gut's saying this is right. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to do it. And you will save so much energy and time. It's exhausting. The overthinking is, because I used to do it all the time.
Yeah,
I used to be a terrible overthinker. And it just took up so much of my headspace and so much of my time. And I'm not saying that there aren't times when I overthink now, but the more I follow my intuition, the more I have that sense of, this event's come up, do I need to go? Yes, I do. I don't know why, but I didn't know why until I got there. And also, there were 120 people at this event, and yet this woman, we just happened to be standing next to each other at the end of the event, and we happened to connect. And that's, to me, is the synchronicity. That's the universe saying, you two need to meet. You need to be at this event. We're going to make sure you're going to follow that intuition. And that, to me, the decision was easy. And the more decisions that you can make with ease in your business, the quicker you can make those decisions. You don't miss out on amazing opportunities because you look back and think, oh, I really should have done to that, or I wish I'd done that. And that also, that feeling that you get when you think, I've let myself down because I should have done something, is very disempowering, can feel very low in energy. Whereas when you make a decision, you're like, yeah, I'm doing this, it lifts you up because you're like, I'm taking action. And whatever that action leads to, it doesn't really matter at the time, but you're taking action, you're following your gut, makes you feel really good.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I can definitely attest to that. To flip it on its head a little bit, has anything come up where it's been negative? Because this is coming off the back of like everyone goes, oh, this sounds all amazing, just follow my intuition, and rainbows will appear, and oh my God, unicorns in the background.
No, I never said anything about unicorns.
Purple zebras, and it's all very, because I noticed you're wearing purple, so I thought I'd point that out. It seems like, at least the impression that some people would be getting, they'd be like, well, is it that easy then? Like the whole world just kind of bends just because you say yes to stuff? I mean, from experience, the more opportunities you get, the more you've got to turn down. and then you start looking at all of them and thinking, I don't want to overthink about this, but I've got 20 things and only 10 I can do. And you start getting crippled by it because you start trying not to overthink. Just go off your intuition. And it seems very positive minded. There seems to be this positivity around it. But has there been any moments when it's been negative?
I think it is very positive, and I understand the fact that it does sound all amazing and skipping through the meadow, but that's not life. Like I say, you won't suddenly stop overthinking. You won't suddenly, when you've got those 20 opportunities and think I've only got time for 10, you're not going to suddenly go, oh, that's okay, I have my intuition and it's all going to be lovely. Because that's not how life is. But what I'm saying is the fact that when you look at those opportunities, and it makes my head hurt. The thought of having 20 opportunities and having to logically think through each one hurts my head. Whereas when I think, okay, which of these opportunities, what do I feel? Which one do I feel like I want to do? I reckon you would be able to cut those down by half really quickly once your intuition is in place and you're going, right, does that feel right? No. Does that feel right? Yes. Does that feel... But it doesn't stop you doubting. It won't suddenly stop you going, oh, should I have done? I don't know. We'll always question ourselves. That's part of who we are. So the negative side, I guess, is that following your intuition doesn't take away that overthinking, doesn't stop you questioning, doesn't stop self-doubt, because we're human beings and that's what we do, and we have our egos and our fears and our limiting beliefs, and it doesn't make that go away. But what it does is the more you follow it and the more you have that sense of what is my gut saying, the more you go into the feeling rather than in your head and this overthinking, it won't stop your overthinking, but it will reduce your thinking. And I think, as I say, that if you have all those decisions and those choices to make, which we do on a daily basis, a lot of them you're making with your intuition anyway, without even realizing it. I think sometimes when you talk about things like this, people suddenly start, oh, I've got to think about my intuition, whereas actually probably most people listening to this are already using it and are already following that gut feeling. They just do it without thinking. But the negative side I get to kind of, because you've asked the question, is the fact that you will always overthink, you will always doubt, you will always have those points of overwhelm. It's just something good to kind of go back to. So it's good to go, okay, but what is my gut telling me? What is my intuition telling me? What do I feel is right? And then another thing is, when you're, like you said about to have that hour when you had that time out, is that we don't stop enough. And to feel into our intuition, you need to go quiet. Yeah. It's quite hard to feel into your intuition when you're in that place of overthinking and busy. So for me, when I want to feel into my intuition, I have to stop. I have to go away from the screen, away from technology, and sit and go, okay, what is this? What am I feeling here? I've got to come out of my headspace and go, right, what is my intuition telling me? Because when you're in that really busy overwhelm, it gets too chaotic, it gets too crazy. So you kind of need to take that step back.
It's almost like if you're in it all the time, like you're always going, logic is a good fun way of slowing things down. So oh my god, like logically. So it's like,
I think part of that is you're using the word logic, but when you slow down and go logically, I would bet money the fact that you are going really what's happening is intuitively, because part of you is going, right, I'm stopping. Like, although you're saying logically and a lot of your head's coming in, there will also be your intuition. Like, you'll also be going, right, what feels right? You might not be calling it intuition and you might not be sitting there really feeling into it, but while you're thinking logically up here, your intuition is coming in as well.
Yeah, I think that we all have different words to describe it, don't we? Like we say, okay, logically, all of a sudden your head goes, well, no, I mean, like, you have to, it has to feel right. So there's that sort of, I like the way that you said that sometimes you think it's logic, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you think it's intuition, but it's not. And then particularly in sort of December, when the whole world seems to not have a clue what it's doing between Christmas and New Year, is kind of like, that's the worst time of the year for people like us, because it's like, well, everyone's slowing down, so I'll slow down. And my head goes, I'm on my way with you now. And it just starts throwing all kinds of like crazy stuff. And this week's been apps, and it's only what day are we on now? Tuesday or no, Thursday, Friday?
Friday.
Exactly.
I don't know what day it is, do you?
It's just like, oh my God, what's going on? It's a weird feeling, because like your head doesn't stop. Your head doesn't stop turning.
No.
But if it's got nothing to focus on, it has to fill the space. So at least mine does. Mine does have to fill the space. So if I have a day or two when I've got nothing on, my head will come up with like crazy creative stuff. Like, oh, you can write a chapter on your book. Okay, all right. And I'm driving away and go, oh, you could do this. I go, oh, okay, and I'm going away. But if I had like 10 things to do that day, I wouldn't have the time to, as you say, slow down.
Yeah.
And the random things just appear inside your little head. But that doesn't happen if you've got a very hyper-structured life. If you've got kids and a business and work and family, and the responsibilities keep piling up, and then you've got your business stuff that you've got to do, and you've got clients, and you've got this, and then you've got that. It can take a while to not physically slow down, because you can go from sprinting to a sleep. You can just lie down. But being able to mentally get to a place whereby you're slow enough for something else to appear can take a while. At least in my experience, it can take a while. Like after the event now, if I want to go, right, follow my intuition, man, it might take me a while to get to a place when I'm not as amped up from the event. I'm not as, oh my God, this is amazing. To get to a place where I go, what's next? It's very hard to shift that state, because the stress level's amped up, you're excited, you're buzzing, everything's going at 1,000,000 miles a second.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to focus enough to really get into that space of, what do I feel like doing? You know, and it's very, very hard to make. I mean, for me, it's easier, because I can have 3 days off if I wanted. I can schedule things in, take a structured break, 3 days of doing nothing. I do it every couple of months, and it's just like, right, nothing for 3 days. A lot of people can't do that. A lot of people, because I've not got a family, so easier for me to do. The business I can run through my laptop or my phone, or I'm traveling or whatever it is. So it's not impossible for me to slow things down. But for others, this is why I like having people like yourself on, Anne-Louise, that live differently. So they've got to have a different way of doing things to be able to, navigate the planet, right? It's like, how would you suggest someone go from organized, not, because when I say stressed out, that's not really what I mean. It's on the go.
Yeah.
There's a difference between stressed out, oh my God, and just not being able to slow down, not being able to stop until you hit the pillow, and then you pray that your brain doesn't stop until it does, actually.
So you go to sleep.
Yeah. So how do you personally, how do you suggest people that have a buzzing kind of day or week get to a space where they can think that way?
Well, you describing me years ago, where I was on the go all the time, and I never switched off, and my brain never switched off, and it was 100 miles an hour all the time. And I think I was in a place where, I wanted to stop. I couldn't switch my head off. I loved being buzzy, and I loved the excitement, and I loved being in that place of let's do, let's get things done. But I wasn't relaxing, and I wasn't stopping, and I knew that wasn't good for me, and I was heading for like a burnout situation. Now, what I did, and this is, I know a lot of people it works for, but it's different for different people. I did meditation. Meditation was the only thing that I discovered that would turn my brain off. I used to call it like white noise. I used to have this white noise in my head all the time. My thoughts never stopped. It didn't matter whether I was busy 100 miles an hour, whether I was trying to do nothing. My head never stopped, ever, ever, ever. I wouldn't follow my intuition. I didn't know how to feel into my gut feel. And it was this constant white noise in my head that I couldn't shut off until I joined a meditation group. This was about 10 years ago. And I used to go every 2 weeks. And for 45 minutes, every 2 weeks, it was the only time my brain would stop and my brain would shut off. Now, in my experience, that keeping that busy and keeping my mind going all the time was because I was trying to avoid thinking about some things that I had to work through, some things that I needed to, some beliefs, some things that happened in childhood, and some things that I needed to work through. So the more busier I kept myself, I didn't have to think. I also didn't have a very good, we were talking about having a good relationship with yourself and trusting yourself. I didn't have any of that. So, I mean, we haven't got time to do the whole conversation about how you get into that good relationship with yourself, and getting to that point where you can be at peace with being quiet and being in that place. So with the question that you asked, in the sense, what can people do that are really, really busy, is you don't have to take 3 days out to feel into your intuition. You don't have to stop for a period of time. The more you practice this, same thing with, we're going back to the gym analogy, the more you think about you doing your weights, there's a time, I'm sure, when you go to the gym and you're lifting a weight that you didn't think you'd ever be able to lift, but then you do it without thinking because you've built that muscle so strongly. And it's the same kind of idea. You have to take that time out and just say, I'm just going to stop and feel into my intuition. I'm going to have the gut feel, but don't make it like this big thing. You are using your intuition every day. You've been using it probably since you were a kid, and you're using it all the time. And we can get into that place of, well, I need to feel my intuition. I need to stop. I need to feel, what is this feeling? Whereas if you can not put that kind of pressure on yourself and know that you're feeling into your intuition all the time, you'll be making decisions like this on a regular basis. I know you're saying it's logic, and part of it will be, but you'll also be feeling in. You'll also be feeling into those decisions. And sometimes it's just, as far as stopping, is that you can stop for a couple of minutes and feel into your intuition. You don't have to go, I know you said you're going 110 miles an hour. You don't have to come down to zero to feel into your intuition. It's just taking yourself away from the doing, from that doing energy, and taking yourself into a more quieter energy. But you don't have to stop the treadmill. You don't have to be going at full pelt on the treadmill, stop the treadmill, get off, feel into your intuition. You can slow it down a bit and feel into it, and then you can take it back up again. But I think it's a practice of learning to slow down. It's a practice of, you don't have to be going at 99 miles an hour all the time to be successful. In fact, sometimes when you're in that place of ease and you're in that place of slowing down and you're in that place of going with the flow or in alignment, whatever your word you want to use, you actually get more done and take more action and are more successful than in this busyness. Because to me, that led to burnout. I get more done now in my business and then with the family and, as you say, with the kids and everything, because I'm in that place of ease rather than being busy all the time. I don't take myself up to 100 miles an hour. If I'm launching something, if I'm busy in the business, of course, then you put your foot on the accelerator more, but it's not constant. And I used to be at that level constantly. So I guess it's a practice of slowing yourself down, but you don't have to go to stop. You don't have to get off the treadmill to feel into your intuition.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting point, actually, because sometimes people think that they do.
Yeah.
But the thing that you need to, I mean, I like the idea of meditating, but sometimes meditating is kind of like trying to get to sleep and your brain goes, here we go, she's meditating, let's dive in. But sometimes it does give you the chance to to slow down. And it is a practice, isn't it? Like, it does get easier the more you do it.
Yeah, the first time I meditated, my brain didn't stop. Like you say, the little cheeky mind monkeys come in, and I used to sit there and try, and it took weeks before my mind even slowed down.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy thought, because people, when you listen to meditators speak and they do all their trainings, and it literally messes with my head, because they don't talk about the first 6 months. They don't talk about it's no help whatsoever in the first 2 months. No, who the hell wanted me to meditate? Who said this was a good thing? Who on earth said that meditating was a good thing?
I think
then after like 3 or 4 months because people that meditate tend to struggle to sleep, they've got high stress levels, they can't process information quickly, so their head's all over the place. Meditating's not going to solve that. If anything, you're giving it the space to run wild when you first do it. So pretty like your brain, if anything, your brain's going to move quicker because it's got less to focus on. So it's but then you've got to get through that. You've got to get through the difficult bit before things do start to get easier. And sometimes I listened to someone the other day actually said, if you haven't got 10 minutes to meditate, you need 2 hours. Because I found that like if you do it for a long time, it does benefit you more than lots of little ones.
Yeah.
Because you get to the end quicker, if that makes sense. You get to the end of all of the God knows what that your brain throws at you a lot faster. Because sometimes I do it for about 10 minutes and I'm sat there and I go, oh my God, I'm only 10 seconds in. Where like now, it's like, okay, well, I can do it for 10 minutes. It's no problem. Things start to kick off after like 15 or 20 minutes. So it does get better, but you've got to go through that. Every second is taking 4 seconds. Oh my God, I can't handle it. My head's going to explode. But that's part, unfortunately, meditators don't talk about that. They don't talk about how hard the practice actually is.
But I didn't, in my experience, I couldn't go from a head that wouldn't switch off and a head that was just thinking thoughts all the time to meditation. For me, the first part of it was the fact that I had given myself permission to stop. I didn't realise it at the time. That's what I was doing. But I was just so grateful to be able to, I mean, when I first started, the kids were not even at school, they were preschool age. So it was very full on. Yeah. And just to have a chance of one evening every fortnight to sit on a sofa and not have to do anything or just be with my thoughts, although I wasn't meditating. And I know, like you said, it does take a while for your brain to switch off. And even now, sometimes when I'm meditating, my brain wanders. I have to go back to my breathing. I don't instantly fall into this deep meditation every time I do it because my head is still, we're still thinkers. It's just the way we are. But for me, when I first started meditating, it was such a relief to stop. And that was all it was for me in the beginning, was just to stop. And yes, the thoughts would be there. And sometimes they'd stop and something they'd come back a second later. And it's, like you say, it's practice, isn't it? It's just having that time. And I remember saying, I don't have time to meditate. I've got kids and I've got a business and I've got a job and I don't have time to meditate. And it's true. If you need to find 10 minutes in the day to stop. But it's a priority thing, isn't it? I used to try and, when the kids went to school, I used to try and meditate as soon as they'd gone to school. It was the first thing I did. Because if I didn't do it then, it would be, well, I'll meditate in a minute. I'll do it after I've done this, and I'll meditate after lunch, and I'll meditate tonight. And then it didn't happen because, like you say, you're busy. Other things get in the way. But just even if it's not full meditation, just giving yourself that space to just sit and be with, whether it's thoughts, whether it's feelings, whether it's nothing, just to be in that space is so good for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I tend to meditate more when things get busier. I don't know if you have this, where like it's the old, when I was a personal trainer, we used to talk about like when you're training harder, you need to rest more. You need to stretch more. And people don't stretch and they're not working that hard either. But then you spend longer training yourself, longer building yourself up. It's the stretching and the resting when you actually improve. So if you're going to work harder, you've got to learn to rest more. It's the same with meditating. Like when I was prepping for like launches and stuff, I was like, right, if I don't meditate, I'm going to explode. I can't afford to not do this thing. Where some people don't think of it like that, because when they're busier, it's automatically pushed to the back burner because they need to work harder. But then you need to rest to a certain degree and recover in order to be able to work as hard as you can. You know, because some people are, I mean, I don't know if you have this, but some people are, how can I put it? They've convinced themselves that their 100% is actually more like 75. And if they meditated and rested and slept well enough, they'd find the other 25% that they're sort of kind of lacking right now.
It's true. And you do have that sense of, I don't know about you, but I never get any of my inspirational ideas for my business when I'm sat at my computer doing work. They come in when I'm driving or in the shower or when I'm meditating, or it's when I'm not thinking is when I go, oh my God, I could do that. That'd be brilliant. It doesn't happen when you're in that busyness, when you're in that doing. And I suppose when we talk about intuition, that same thing of listening in, you're probably fine. You're listening to your intuition when you're driving your car, when you're going for a walk, when you're out with the dog, when you're in the shower. That's when you're not trying. I think sometimes with meditation, when they start, is people trying too hard. I'm trying to listen to my intuition. I'm trying to meditate. And actually, when you're driving the car and you're doing it automatically, or you're going for a walk, you're intuitively feeling in, you get those ideas, but it comes in that moment when you've switched off, when you're not really thinking.
Yeah, it's a crazy feeling actually when you go out for a walk and go, oh my God, I could do this. And it's sort of the way we could probably summarize that would be intuition's found when we stop, isn't it? It's found when we slow down. It's found when we don't have the sort of the busyness that goes on. We're able to stop, slow down, and then listen to ourselves a lot more than listening to others in some regards.
But also, the more you use it, it'll become second nature for you to feel intuitively, because it's not that you can't feel your intuition when you're busy. It's just that when you're learning and you're starting to feel into your intuition more, it's good to stop and slow down. But once you get used to it, in the same way you go to the gym and pick up that heavy weight because you've been doing it for so long and you've built that muscle, you will just go, okay, what does my gut tell me? Right, okay, it tells me that, and you're done.
Yeah, it's definitely getting easier over time, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Where can people learn more about this, Anne-Louise? Where can people find out about you and what you've got going on?
Okay, you will find me in the Intuitive Leaders Lounge, which is a Facebook group. That's for women only, the Facebook group, the Intuitive Leaders Lounge. On my website is Anne-Louise.com, and I also have a Facebook business page, which is Anne-Louise.com, and then Instagram is Intuitive Leaders. So any of those, you can find me, message me.
All right, awesome. Well, I don't think we have anyone live, so unless you have anything that you want to finish with, anything that we've not covered, anything that you intuitively want to cover, anything that you think I would regret it if I didn't mention this, what would it be?
I think we've covered it already, but it's just, I just don't want people to think that this using your intuition is something that you've got to learn new, that you are doing it already, that you're following your intuition, that it's not something you need to learn in the sense of trying hard to do it, but it is like building a muscle. It is like you are following your intuition already, and just let it be something that's natural rather than something that you have to work out.
All right. Well, Anne-Louise, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
I appreciate you carving the time out, and I look forward to chatting again soon.
Thanks very much.